Newspapers and magazines frequently produce ranked lists of public intellectuals throughout the world. Steven Pinker's always on those lists, and rightly so. I think he'd be near the top of my world list. And I'm truly delighted that he's been given this award in my name. Wonderfully readable, he introduces non-specialist readers to his own specialist subject. He's not the only person to do that, although he does it superlatively well. But what's truly remarkable is that he does it for several different subjects. And unlike, say, a typical science journalist, he's a genuine world-class expert in all the subjects he writes about. His scholarship is as deep as his writing style is gripping. I blush to admit that the first time I heard his name, he was described to me as the Richard Dawkins of linguistics. Well, I read The Language Instinct then and was extremely gratified and flattered by the comparison. I'd love to be called the Steven Pinker of anything. But he hasn't stopped at linguistics. Psychology will never be the same again after How the Mind Works, a superb account of the honourable, though unaccountably controversial, field of evolutionary psychology. Every page of this magnificent book gives the mind something to work on. Steve doesn't just inform the reader, he stimulates the reader to have stimulating thoughts of their own. Steve is courageous, he doesn't hang back from controversy, and he's made himself unpopular in circles that should know better. The blank slate burst into a culture where many social scientists had an attitude to genes that we could satirize like this. I suppose we reluctantly have to admit that genes exist, but we deeply suspect them of being nasty fascist things, and I wish they'd all just go away. The blank slate takes a mercilessly critical look at the whole question of nativism versus environmentalism. Amazingly, for such a much-rehearsed subject, it's a thoroughly entertaining book, and it takes a Pinker to achieve that feat. In Words and Rules, Steve returned to language and uses the clever technique of zeroing in on a detail, regular and irregular verbs, and zooming out to illuminate, well, how the mind works. After achieving so much, you might have expected him to rest on his very considerable laurels. And actually, a laurel wreath would look quite becoming on that famous coiffure. But resting on his laurels was exactly what Steve didn't do. He produced what can only be described as a magnum opus, and he did it by moving into yet another completely new field, history. The Better Angels of Our Nature is a magisterial work of history, but it's unmistakably the work of a scientist too. A scientist and a historian at the height of his powers. We in our movement have to counter a number of silly arguments, and one of the commonest and silliest is this. Without religion, you will have no moral compass. Only religion can tell you what's right or wrong. Without religion, anything goes. But we are all, whether religious or not, children of our present, and our moral compass is of the present. At the beginning of the 21st century, the centre of moral gravity accepts all kinds of things which would have been way ahead of the most progressive avant-garde a couple of centuries ago. Even T.H. Huxley, Abraham Lincoln, in the vanguard of progressive thought for their time, would be judged racist and probably sexist by the standards of today. Today we are less sexist than even quite recently. Women didn't get the vote in the USA until 1920, and Britain's much the same. We're less violent, more concerned for the welfare of civilians in warfare. Even Donald Rumsfeld sounds like a bleeding heart liberal compared to Winston Churchill or Bomber Harris in the Second World War. These advances, which label us moralists of the 21st century, clearly owe nothing to scripture or to religion in any way. To the extent that progressive verses can be found in religious scriptures, you have to hunt for them amid a multitude of other verses, which would be considered vile by the standards of today. We've probably all noticed the shifting moral zeitgeist in one way or another. But Steven Pinker has documented it with massive scholarship, going back to early prehistory. The Better Angels of Our Nature is a book for the ages, and it will, I'm confident, last through the ages. It's not just a scholarly tour de force, it's a document of hope and optimism. Hope and optimism are much needed today, and that very fact should make us suspicious of anyone who steps up to offer them. But our suspicion is effortlessly brushed away by the sheer weight of scholarship in this book. And if weight of scholarship suggests heavy going, that's exactly wrong. The book is light and easy reading, good company, witty and amusing like its author. He's one of those intellectuals who not only enlightens but raises the game of anyone he's talking to, increasing the chance that they will add enlightenment too. I have long felt that it's high time the Nobel Prize for Literature went to a scientist, rather than always going to a novelist or occasionally a philosopher or historian. But when I'm challenged to name a particular scientist who deserves the honour, I'm brought up short. The Better Angels of Our Nature is only Steven Pinker's magnum opus so far. Already, I think his corpus of books makes a solid case that a scientist should win the Literature Prize. I am humbled and honoured that the Atheist Alliance has chosen so illustrious a scholar as Steven Pinker, a personal hero, for the award in my name.